This is Hilchos Shabbos with Rabbi Moshe Shnerb, only on 101.9 Chai FM.
101.9 Chai FM. This is the late afternoon Erev Shabbos show with Rabbi Moshe Shnerb, and a warm welcome to all of you. I hope that yesterday, Tisha B'Av, was a wonderfully meaningful and productive day for you, and that we did a lot of the work that we needed to do on Tisha B'Av, to actually kind of sit down and contemplate where we are and where we need to get to and how we're going to get there, because that really is what Tisha B'Av is all about. It's the beginning of a process. It's something we have to kind of set our minds to and kind of resolve to do things that maybe we haven't done for a while. The program today, as always, is brought to you as a refuah shlema for many chodim, a few of them who will mention, but obviously the list is much, much greater. Shmuel Chaim ben Ela Devorah, Yishai ben Devorah Leah, Omri bas Einat, Yehuda Hillel ben Shulamis Leah, Tzivia bas Malka Yehudis Brocha bas Rochel, Esther bas Tzipora, Devorah Yocha bas Mira Beseich Shar Choyle Yisrael, amongst all those, amongst Klal Yisrael, and there's so many who need HaKadosh Baruch Hu's Yeshua, so we need HaKadosh Baruch Hu's comfort, we need HaKadosh Baruch Hu's help and a caress and a kiss. So many people are lonely, so many people are hurting, so many people are bereft of any sort of hope in their lives. And please God, in this time, we're now in the time of Shabbos Nachum, we're in the time of looking upward, of trying to look forward and see what we can do. Please, Kadosh Baruch Hu should help all of these people. We have in this week's Parsha, of course, the Shema, and the Torah says, "V'ahavtos Hashem lekech," you shall love Hashem your God. Now, one of the most demanding mitzvahs is actually to love Hashem with all your heart. Love is, of course, an emotion. And how can one be commanded to love? The Torah itself kind of intimates the answer when it actually commands a person to think and teach Torah. When one studies Torah, he is granted a sort of a teeny window into Hashem's infinite wisdom. When one absorbs this, he kind of revels in Hashem's wisdom, praise and love for the author of the great Torah. Harav Yosef Zundel Hutner Zal was the Rav of Alshok and author of the book Ulam HaMishpat, wonders why we, sadly, find Torah scholars who, albeit very proficient in their Torah knowledge, have not reached the level of true Avas Hashem. It is the reality. Individuals whose scholarship is kind of undeniable, but whose love for Hashem, the burning passion that the world expects, is not present, right? Should not kind of erudition go hand in hand with love for HaKadosh Baruch Hu? How can it be? He explains this based upon a kind of an unrelated halacha, right, concerning chalitza. The Torah requires the shoe. If someone was married to a woman and the husband dies before they have children, so there's a Torah obligation for the brother of the deceased to marry his sister-in-law, of course, but he also has the option of doing chalitza, which means a whole process where she has to remove his shoe, and the Torah requires the shoe to be removed from the foot. If one is wearing two shoes, but he only removes one shoe, right, allowing for the foot to be still covered, the chalitza is invalid. Right? The flesh must be exposed. Any sort of barrier, any additional covering serves as a barrier to its validity. So too it is with Torah. If one learns Torah while wearing another shoe, right? If his motivation is honor, if his motivation is distinction or personal kind of aggrandizement, right? That then a barrier exists between himself and the Torah. The Torah does not penetrate. It does not emerge from within. It kind of remains external, kind of layered over his ulterior motives. Such learning, no matter how brilliant, right, is encased, it's obstructed, and ultimately unable to give birth to genuine Avas Hashem. This is 101.9 Chai FM. This is the late Erev Shabbos show. My name is Rabbi Moshe Shnerb. We'll be back in a moment. Entirely different occurs. The shoe is removed, and we experience no separation, no intervening layer. The Torah.
This is Hilchos Shabbos with Rabbi Moshe Shnerb, only on 101.9 Chai FM.
101.9 Chai FM. This is the late afternoon Erev Shabbos show. My name is Rabbi Moshe Shnerb, and it's great to be with you again. I hope that your fast yesterday was not difficult and that it was a meaningful day. It can be a very, very spiritually uplifting day if one spends it in the right way, and we begin to build ourselves now towards the days of the Rosh Hashanah, which is only, scarily enough maybe, only 7 weeks away. 7 weeks from tonight is actually the first night of Rosh Hashanah. Quite something. But let's deal with the Parsha we have this week. And of course, in this week's Parsha, we again merit to read the second version of the Aseres HaDibrot, of the 10 commandments that God commanded. And I want to speak, therefore it's a bit of an opportunity perhaps, especially after Tisha B'Av, where we've kind of reconnected ourselves and recommitted ourselves to Hashem, to the Torah. Let's talk a little bit about the incredible levels of Torah and what it can actually mean in our life. You know, when we think about the stories, sometimes the incredible stories, the miracles that were done by our great forefathers. So it actually raises a tremendous question that actually needs to be explained. You know, obviously, if one reads through the Tanakh, both the 5 books of Moshe and the Nach, and one comes across all sorts of great signs, great wonders that were done by our great prophets, right? That's obviously things that were beyond nature, beyond the normal way of doing it, and they were those kind of things that were done only in special situations, and obviously when the need arose. But as we go later, and we go into the Gemara, the Torah Sheba'al Peh, the oral Torah, we see by the Amoraim were the authors of the Talmud, of the Gemara, the Tanaim, who were very involved in the Mishnayos. We see also various kinds of tremendous miracles that were done, but they seem to be done much more regularly, and sometimes were done sort of on a regular basis. And even though, of course, we understand that the closer a person is to Har Sinai, to the actual giving of the Torah, the greater they were, yet there seems to be like a fly in the ointment. How can it be that perhaps these later generations even managed more constant and perhaps seemingly sometimes even more amazing miracles than happened in the time of our prophet? Let's just bring up maybe perhaps a couple of the examples just to sort of flesh out the question. Number one, right? We know with the tremendous miracles of Avram Avinu in a place called Ur Kasdim, where he merited to be saved from the fiery furnace and to emerge complete in both body and soul. Not even his clothing were burnt. So that's one of the greatest miracles that we know about, and that happened to Avram Avinu, right? And we know, the same sort of miracle happened later in Tanakh to Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Also were thrown into a fiery furnace, and again, they weren't damaged at all, right? Because there it says that the angel, Malach Gavriel, he was sent to save them. But in sort of kind of a contrast to that, we find, let's say, a Gemara in Ksivus on page Samach Zayin regarding a man called Mar Ukva and his wife, that they voluntarily went into a burning furnace in order that they shouldn't embarrass another Jew whom they were giving charity to, and nothing at all happened to them at all. And the Gemara said doesn't even sort of kind of go wild about the greatness of the miracle that they also were saved from a furnace, and as if it's something that it's a regular event. Similarly, there's a Gemara told about Rabbi Zera, Gemara in Bab Metzia on page Pei, that he used to sort of put himself intentionally every 30 days into a burning furnace in order to actually discern whether or not a fire would actually burn him, and through that he would know whether in the future he would also be protected from the fires of Gehenna. And it's true, the fire did not have any control of him until the Chachamim kind of looked at him a bit askance. And even there, the Gemara doesn't sort of seem to compare the specter of that miracle to what was done to Avram Avinu. It sounds like, it was just an event. Number two, we find in Tanakh special honor given to the concept of great people who resurrected dead people. For example, Eliyahu HaNavi and Elisha HaNavi, right? Who both of them, who actually Elisha merited double the spirituality of his Rebbe Eliyahu, and he was able to resurrect two people. While Chazal, sort of, when they talk about this regarding the Chachamim in the Gemara, again, it was something that seems to have happened much more naturally and quite often. Until the Gemara says that the smallest of the Tanaim had the power to resurrect the dead, and without sort of almost special effort, as it says that the Gemara in Vanazara Daf Yud, Antiochus said to Rebbe, he says that when he saw that Rav Chanina Bar Chama was able to resurrect his dead sort of servants, right? And Gemara in Ksuvos also talks about that Rabbi Chanina Bar Chachinoi was able to through his tefillah, through his prayer, he was able to resurrect his wife who died. And similarly, by Rabbi Yochanan in Baba Kama, that he resurrected Rav Kahana in spite of the fact that he was already in his grave. And Rabbah resurrected Rabbi Zera, right, one day after he died, as the Gemara in Megillah says. Right? Number three, in the book of Daniel, great importance is given to the miracle of the salvation of Daniel from the lion's den, right? And the story is drawn out very lengthily and it's quite detailed there in the 6th parak of Daniel. And nevertheless, in the Gemara in Sanhedrin on page Lamites, there's a very similar story where almost as a side story that the Roman Caesar put Rav Tanchum into a sort of a den full of crazy animals as a punishment because he kind of bested him in an argument, and these wild animals didn't touch him at all. That's number 3. Number 4, in Melachim Aleph, we find that Eliyahu HaNavi, right, needed tremendous amount of tefillah, of prayer, of beseeching Hashem in order to bring rain after years and years of a famine. However, in the Mishnah, in Tainus, it already says, it explains that Choni Amabel, that with one tefillah, he was able to bring down a huge deluge of rain. And although it seems that the degree of the famine at the time of Eliyahu was the same as the famine in the time of Choni HaMagel, it seems that Choni HaMagel had a much easier time to be able to bring the rain, one short tefillah. In fact, the Gemara says that his grandchildren of Choni HaMagel, Abba Chilkiah and Hanan, Anechwa, also had the ability to bring down rain with their tefillahs. And the Gemara even brings that other Tanoim and Amoraim who were able to do this. So what seems to be happening here? How do we understand this phenomenon that sometimes miracles seem to be so rare and sometimes they seem to be so common? We'll come back in a moment and explore this phenomenon. This is 101.9 Chai FM, the late afternoon Erev Shabbos show. My name is Rabbi Moshe Shler. We'll be back in a moment.
This is Hilchos Shabbos with Rabbi Moshe Shnerb, only on 101.9 Chai FM.
101.9 Chai FM. This is the late afternoon Erev Shabbos show. My name is Rabbi Moshe Shnerb. We are discussing a very interesting phenomenon, how miracles in the time of the Torah and Nevi'im Ksuvim seem to have been much more rare, much more far between, and almost like more difficult to procure than later on during the time of the Gemara. And we bring several examples, just as during the break. I'm thinking of another one that when Shmuel HaNavi sort of remonstrated with the Jewish nation for asking for a king, which was a wrong request at that time. Hashem was the king. So in order to prove his point, Shmuel made it rain in the middle of the summertime. And that was and then it says that the people all feared Hashem after that. Yet we find that in the Gemara in Tainus that Rava through his tefillah managed to bring a lot of rain during the summertime in Bavel, and it doesn't seem to be any great shakes almost. And there are many actions of the power of the Chacham of Klal Yisrael to change nature. Right, there was a story with Rav Yitzchak ben Eliashov, also there in Tainus, that he was able to change the appearance of a person from being ugly to being very nice, and the other way around, etc. So we see there are many stories here, and this is actually only a very small sampling of the incredible, miraculous changes of nature and amazing things that were done by the Tanoim and Amoraim who are mentioned both in the Talmud Bavli and in the Yerushalmi, and they seem to be much less kind of significant wow factors done sort of through a tefillah or through a request from Hashem without tremendous kind of effort. And actually a lot of them actually even happened outside of Eretz Yisrael, which is land that is not as sublime and holy as in Eretz Yisrael. Even in Bavel, which seems to be very different than the process of miracles and wonders that happened in the time of the Tanakh, that they were done generally in Eretz Yisrael, and for a one particular a need, and sort of for the purpose of bringing a Kiddush Hashem, a public Kiddush Hashem, or something like that. So therefore, we really, really need to understand why were our great Rabbanim, the Tanoim and the Meroim, merit to do these amazing miracles of actually, sort of changing nature without seemingly any tremendous effort, something which greater people seem to not have been able to do. And at the same time, we have to sort of clarify, does this power that we find by the Tanoim and the Amoraim, is it still present in later generations, right? Is it someone, let's say, possible for someone in our generation to reach such a level where you can change nature? Or maybe this power has been hidden away, that it was only at that time. So in order to properly understand the question, so we need to understand a little bit about the very, very essence of the written Torah, which includes the 24 books of the Tanakh, almost like versus the Torah Shabal Peh, the oral Torah, which includes all the statements of our Chazal in the Talmud and in the Midrashim, right? And obviously all the Agadic Midrashim, etc., that appear in Talmud Bavli and in the Yerushalmi and in the various Midrashim, Midrash Rabbah, Midrash Tanchuma, etc., etc. The Torah was given to the Jewish nation, we know, on the 6th of Nisan, right? In the year that they left Mitzrayim. If the Jewish nation had merited and they had not committed the sin of the Egel, of the golden calf, so they would have received from Moshe Rabbeinu the first set of luchos, on which was actually written by the hand of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and they would have merited to acquire the Torah. Mamish, it would have been engraved on their hearts for eternity, and the Torah could never have been forgotten. And therefore, through the learning it, even just one time alone, so they would have revealed all the hidden parts of Torah, everything that's there in every single crown and every single letter in the entire Torah, and all the hidden meanings. And they would have remembered this forever without ever having forgotten anything learned. Similarly, they wouldn't have had to work very, very hard in order to understand the words of the Torah. In fact, it's brought by the books. And in fact, the Gemara in Shabbos brings it, that at the time of Matan Torah, the Jewish nation reached and understood all the secrets that were hidden in the Torah, because they had, remember, as we discussed, they lost that poison, they lost that terrible need to be physical, almost, that had been injected to them by the nachash, by the sin of Adam Orisha. However, unfortunately, because of the sin of the golden calf, of the Egel, they lost all these tremendous levels. And Moshe Rabbeinu then was forced to actually break the first luchos that were given to him from the hands of Hashem. And only months later, on Yom Kippur, on the 10th of Tishrei, after he had to go, after the whole nation went and did a complete tshuva for the sin of the Egel, only then did they merit to receive the second luchos that again were written by Moshe Rabbeinu and not by HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And even though that, as far as the actual Torah, there was no difference between the first and second luchos, and still all the secrets, all the secrets of creation were still hidden in the Torah, right? Same as they were in the time that HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself wrote them, but nevertheless, the situation that the Jewish nation after the sin of Egel, in other words, because they had received, unfortunately, in return, that poison of the primeval snake came back to them. So it was no longer possible for them to see and for them to reveal all of these secrets that are in every single letter of the Torah in the same way as they would have been able to do before the sin lega. In other words, in the situation that they were without the poison of the nachash. And now, after the sin, only those who would really, really exert themselves and learn with absolute purity and for the right reasons, only they are going to be merit to reveal all the secrets of the Torah. And even that, it's going to take them tremendous amount of work in order to do it. And they're going to have to revise and go over it again and again and again, right, the whole Torah, in order that they should somehow preserve what they learned in their memory without forgetting it, which we said before the Chet, they wouldn't have had to work hard, they would have remembered it automatically. And this is actually explained at length in this forum. However, there was one thing that they received because they got the second luchas. There was one additional factor that they had from the second luchas that they didn't have in the first luchas, that they received on Yom Kippur after they did this tshuva out of complete love. And that was that they merited to acquire the Torah as an eternal acquisition. Right? That it's never ever going to leave the Jewish nation forever. As in fact, the verse says in Shir Hashirim, it says, Achaztiv v'lo yarpenu. I'm grabbing onto it, I will never ever let go. Ad shiv yosiv el beis imi, until I bring it to the house of my mother, vel cheda harasi, and to the room of my parents. And as the Goyen explains there, that this pasuk is speaking about the second luchos and the Anania covered the clouds of glory and the Shekhinah that came back to them on Motzei Yom Kippur in a process that carried on 5 days until they began constructing the Mishkan 5 days later. And this acquisition that now was going to be eternal, that's happened to them specifically because of the tremendous arousal that they had, which was their tshuva, and for that merit they received the lucha shniyos as a guarantee that it would never ever leave the Jewish nation, as the Tur explains, and the Pirkei Rabbi laws also, all of them explain that, and not like the first luchos, which came from Shemayim, but they lost it. This we will never ever lose. And that is saying that although the guile of the Satan, the Yetzer Hara, caused them to lose the first set of luchas, this will never ever be able to take it away from us, which is a tremendous thing, no matter what sin the Jewish nation might do. Now, in spite of the fact that the Jewish nation merited to receive this second sort of version of the Torah, and certainly they were prepared and they did work very hard in order to learn it and to preserve it. Nevertheless, they still couldn't get to the deep secrets of the Torah like they would have been able to with the first version, and they were working very hard in order to get to the depth of the Torah. Now, this ability, which is sort of intrinsic to Torah, of being able to understand one thing from another thing, that's called Torah Sheba'al Peh, the oral Torah. And on that, the Gemara actually says in Shabbos that Vayisyatsu b'sachtes ha'or, they had to stand underneath the mountain. And Rav Avidami says that Hashem took the mountain and put it over their heads like a barrel and said to them, if you accept the Torah, great, and if not, see that mountain, that will be your burial place. And Amar of Yaakov, so we see that then there is now an excuse. Seemingly, we were compelled to receive the Torah, right? And therefore, the Gemara says, if God's going to come to us with an accusation, why didn't you fulfill my Torah? So we have a ready excuse. You forced us to take it. Rabba then says, don't worry. Later on, at the time of the Nes of Purim, we willingly accepted the Torah that seemingly we were compelled to accept at Har Sinai. So the Medrash says, the Medrash in Tanchuma actually says that what was it that, because they already had said, Na'asev Nishma, they had expressed their absolute willingness to accept the Torah. So where was there a need for compulsion? Why did Hashem have to put a mountain over their heads? And the Medrash explains, because what they accepted willingly was the written Torah. But the oral Torah, which is something much more difficult, requires a lot of tedium, requires hard work, requires effort, requires tremendous depth to get to the sort of the bottom of the halacha and decide what the halacha is as something permitted or not. That was something that requires tremendous effort. And at that the Jews balked. They weren't so sure, and there Hashem had to force them to do it. Right? And Hashem saying, if you're going to accept this Torah, great. If not, then you have no connection to Torah. Right? And that was not on the written Torah, because that they accepted quite willingly, but it was specifically this oral Torah, which is so difficult, and you have to be moist and nefesh, you have to put in your heart and soul to really understand it, and not everyone does until they actually put tremendous effort. That required tremendous effort, and that they weren't so willing to do, and that they needed to be compelled to accept. So based on this Tanchuma, we come out that until the time of Mordechai and Esther, which was at this time of the Babylonian Golus, Klal Yisrael were missing this tremendous attribute of the Torah Sheba'al Peh, that they didn't accept it willingly. And even though they had the great Torah leaders, that what's called the Sanhedrin, that came down to Bavel with them, right, 12 years before even the destruction of the first Beis HaMikdash, and their greatness in Torah is actually explained in the Medrash. Nevertheless, still, they didn't have that capacity to really go in and really put their heads into Limud HaTorah Sheba'al Peh on a complete level, which it requires. Because since from the moment that it was forced upon them at Har Sinai, so they hadn't yet accepted it with love, and therefore there was not yet a complete commitment, a complete dedication to it. And therefore they didn't put as much effort as they did, and therefore they couldn't reveal all of the hidden secrets. However, when Haman or Russia wanted to destroy and wipe out the entire Jewish nation that found anywhere in the world, and Achashverosh agreed to him, this decree caused the Jewish nation to be aroused to a level of tshuva, tremendous level of tshuva. And when Hashem responded to them and saved them in His tremendous, tremendous mercy from this gezerah, and not only that, did tremendous miracles and wonders as explained in the Megillus Esther. So these miracles that Hashem showed them made kind of they understood the great love that Hashem has for His Jewish nation. That caused them to accept willingly and openly on themselves and on their children, out of the great love and out of total altruism, they accepted upon themselves the learning of the Torah Sheba'al Peh and committed themselves to work on it with all of their strength, in spite of the difficulty that was involved in learning it. Now, this tremendous love that brought them to accept the Torah Sheba'al Peh out of love, that is what stood as the very basis of the construction of the second temple, who they were given permission to build through Darius II, Darius, who was the son of Achashverosh, the son of Esther, and therefore he was actually a Jew. And Ezra, who was also the prophets Malachi and Haggai, made such a tremendous effort. They said they're not going to leave any stone unturned to make sure that this was the most beautiful Beis Hamikdash built, and they put so much effort in, right? And that came on the heels of their tremendous acceptance and commitment to the learning of Torah. So maybe now we can get an answer to our question. In other words, their tremendous drive, their tremendous she'ifa of those generations that came after this voluntary acceptance of the Torah Sheba'al Peh, in other words, from the time of Mordechai and Esther and onwards, and when you add on to that, the very, very hard work and then the tremendous effort that they put into learning Torah, which often involved sort of self-flagellation and keeping themselves away from many physical pleasures. So they merited to once again be able to plumb the very, very depth of the Torah. Even such things that normally most mortals can't understand, like the configuration of things up in Shemayim, the creation of the world. And with their tremendous good, they didn't leave any stone unturned that they didn't try to understand. And they tried to clarify every single statement and every single halacha to its very, very depth. And therefore, as a reward for that, God fulfilled their will and their desire and gave to them a sort of a full handful from His tremendous chokhmah and revealed to them all these secrets. And this sort of unnatural sort of effort on their part gave them such a deep understanding of the Torah and the world, and gave them, to a certain extent, much greater control over even the natural events of the world, and therefore the miracles that they were able to perform came from their involvement, from their study of their knowledge of Torah. Okay, we're going to stop here, take a break. This is 101.9 Chai FM. The program is the late afternoon Erev Shabbos show. My name is Rabbi Moshe Shnerb. We'll be back in a moment with our Hilchos Shabbos slot.
This is Hilchos Shabbos with Rabbi Moshe Shnerb, only on 101.9 Chai FM.
101.9 Chai FM. This is the late afternoon Erev Shabbos show. My name is Rabbi Moshe Shnerb, and a warm welcome to anyone who's still joining us at this point of the show. I really do daven that your Tisha B'Av was something memorable, that it was something that you got tremendous strength and resolve from. That wasn't too difficult either, please God, so that we're able to sort of carry on. And now we emerge from Tisha B'Av. In fact, it's already after midday, so we can have meat, we can have wine, we can do whatever, listen to music, all those things are now permitted. Life, so to speak, carries on, but hopefully it doesn't just carry on, but we are actually emerged, enriched, and kind of strengthened from our experience on Tisha B'Av. Well, we're coming straight away after Tisha B'Av, of course, to the first Shabbos, which, as we'll see, gets its name from the special Haftarah that we're going to read this week. Right? Nachamu, Ami, my nation, it's time for you to be comforted. And it's time to realize that the end is not here. It's just the beginning, and we can do so much. We can change ourselves. We can change the world by sort of just ramping up our behavior a little bit. And that is an amazing, amazing thing for us to know and be aware. As we do at this point on the show every week, just to go through the important details you might need to know for this coming Shabbos Kodesh Parshat Vaetchanan. So firstly, this afternoon, just now, the earliest time for lighting one's Shabbos candles is at 4:30. 4:30 is the earliest time to get your Shabbos candles up and running. And again, there's no reason why we can't give it a go. Right, let's get the food hot. Let's get ourselves ready. Let's get everything put away. Right, let's say, get the kids involved. They must also. It's their Shabbos as much as ours. Get them involved. Let them clean up their rooms. Let them help in the kitchen a bit. Those who can, let them set the table. There's so much that children can do, and they must be trained to do. What's going to happen when they get married and they have families? Who's going to prepare Shabbos in their homes? Not them, because they don't know how to do it. So therefore, we have to get them involved already now. So 4:30 is the earliest time. If you can't manage that, well, 4:45, 5 o'clock, whatever it is great, because the latest time for benching licht on this Friday night is actually already at 5:20. It's already gone 15 minutes later. 5:20 is the latest time. So let's try to get in sort of under the bar before the deadline. 5:20, of course, is, as always, our deadline for lighting Shabbos candles. It's really the cutoff point. By that time, everything should be done. The food must be on the hot tray. We have to be bought and ready. Right? All the muktzah items should be away. The house should look like it's actually ready to accept and greet the Shabbos angels who come home with us from shul, and we must allow the incredible atmosphere of Shabbos to overtake us, overtake everything in our home. Yes, of course, as always, there are the 18 minutes after sunset, after candlelighting, but those are emergency moments set aside only for emergency situations. We should not stick our finger and use that time at all. Sunset is at 5:38, and that's obviously the absolute deadline. Therefore, if you want to make sure that you can, when you daven Ma'ariv, it's properly at night, 5:56 is already proper night. You can daven, you can say the Kriyat Shema, fulfill your biblical obligation of saying the Kriyat Shema at night, and then we still come home fairly early, and it's still a wonderful Friday night. The 3 weeks we've gone through, we've done what we have to do. Now we're sort of looking up the ladder towards Rosh Hashanah, and such a ladder to climb, but we're resolved to get to it and do it. Tomorrow, of course, is Shabbos Kodesh Parshat Vaetchanan. Beautiful Parsha. We get a second hearing of the Aseret HaDibrot. We hear the first Parsha of the Shema. Many beautiful things. And as I say, the Haftarah is the first of the 7 special Haftarahs of comfort, leading us straight up all the way to Rosh Hashanah. This week, as I say, is Nachamu, Ami. And of course, Shabbos Kodesh carries on. This week, the Perek we're going to be reading in Pirkei Avos is chapter 3. So if you have a time in the afternoon, and make time in the afternoon to open a book, learn something, be inspired. Make Tisha B'Av not a one-time event, but just a springboard for growth that's going to take us further and further. Shabbos Kodesh will end tomorrow night. It's getting later. Slowly. Shabbos Kodesh ends tomorrow night at 6:11. 6:11 is the end of Shabbos tomorrow night, and we go into a beautiful, beautiful week. We have the 15th of Av coming up this week, which is a special holiday in the Jewish cycle. A blind person is allowed to go into a public place with his seeing eye dog, even though he's sort of holding the actual harness, right, kind of attached to his dog. Why? Since the harness is always attached to the dog, so it's considered part secondary to its body, and there's actually no problem of carrying at all. But most of there are some who are strict. Orchos Shabbos is strict, but it seems actually reasonable to allow the blind person to do that, and others agree with that psak also. And a dog, we say, may be taken out, right, into a public place wearing his tags, which are connected to its collar or its ear, and on which is kind of written the name of the dog's owner, and the tags make it clear that the dog has an owner, and therefore people are more likely to actually leave it alone. What about food for animals? So an animal is allowed to be led to sort of graze in a grassy area, and it does not sort of constitute the fact you're not harvesting the grass to give it to him. He's doing it himself. The animal itself comes and rips the grass out and ate it for its own sake, right? And we're not actually commanded to make sure that animals keep Shabbos, only that they don't actually do work for us. That we can't do, but they're not mechuyev to keep the 39 melachos. One may provide food and water to animals in your possession that actually depend on him. Your cows, your chickens, your cats, right? And food and water may also be provided to animals belonging to another Jew. However, one may not feed or water sort of self-sufficient animals, I don't know, your bees, your doves, even though feeding them is not a malacha per se. The sages prohibited it because it's seen as what we call tircha yeseret. It's seen as requiring excessive amount of effort. Now, one may put food out for sort of hungry animals like stray dogs and cats. As we know, and we've discussed, Hashem shows mercy to all of his creatures, right? As we say, Toiv Lashem Lakol, Borach, Hashem's mercy is on everything. I would say Nasha every day, right? And it is proper to ensure that we emulate, we copy the ways of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Right? Animals themselves are muktzah. Right? They may not be picked up, nor may their sort of limbs be actually lifted up. However, when it is necessary for their well-being, let's say, for example, in order to get them to their food or something, one may take hold of them and move their limbs to prevent them from any kind of tsar balachayim, from any kind of suffering, as long as one does not lift them off the ground. That one has to be very, very careful about in dealing with dogs. Okay, we're going to stop here. We'll come back with a few closing comments in a moment. This is 101.9 Chai FM. The program is the late afternoon Erev Shabbos show. My name is Rabbi Moshe Shlerb, and this is the greatest Jewish radio station in all of Africa.
This is Hilchos Shabbos with Rabbi Moshe Shnerb, only on 101.9 Chai FM.
101.9 Chai FM. This is the late afternoon Erev Shabbos show with Rabbi Moshe Shnerb. We are dealing with the laws of animals, and particularly animals eating on Shabbos. So let's say an animal is having difficulty actually eating unless the food is actually placed directly in their mouths. So you are allowed to feed them in this way, as long as he doesn't force feed them. You can't stuff food down their throats. Force feeding actually refers to kind of shoving the food so far down their throats that they are unable to spit it up. This, again, the Gemara says that is considered tircha yasera. That requires an excessive effort, and the Shulchan Aruch and the Gemara also both absolutely forbid. Besides, it may very well be cruel to certain animals, for sure. One may ask a non-Jew to feed sort of geese that have been force-fed for so long, this is sad, that they are actually unable to eat otherwise and would actually suffer hunger and pain if they were not fed on Shabbos. In such a case, one may ask a non-Jew to feed them one time on Shabbos. Supposedly, one time of force feeding is enough to keep him going for the full 24 hours. If there is no non-Jew available, then there's a whole discussion. The poskim disagree whether a Jew may feed them in order to minimize their suffering. And the Mishnah Berurah discusses that in Shin Chav Dalet. It is better not to force feed geese at all, because as doing so causes them actually pain and actually entails various prohibitions on Shabbos. So please try to avoid doing that. One may cut up food for animals if they would not be able to readily eat it otherwise. This includes sort of cutting up, pumpkins, right, that are fed to animals, or tough carcasses that are fed to dogs and that they have trouble eating. However, one may not cut up any food for them that they could eat by themselves. Even if cutting makes it easier for them to eat, it's also considered tircha yasera. It's considered excessive effort and thus forbidden on Shabbos. If the animal can manage, then let him manage, and you go and manage what you need to manage on Shabbos. Well, that about ends our time. We better just say goodbye. Thank you all for being with us. Have a wonderful, wonderful Shabbos. And just to all of our wonderful radio audience, I want to wish a good Shabbos, a Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat Menucha, Kedusha, Shabbos of such rest, of such sublimity and holiness, that please God, we merit to bring the Shekhinah into our lives and into our homes. Thank you for being with us. Kol Tov. Good Shabbos.